G'day viewers, in this episode we're going to talk about UFO propaganda. If you've been watching our episodes, you'll see that I have made no secret of the fact that I believe the Bob Lazar story. I believe his story because I've proven some key scientific claims Lazar has made for myself. I have not relied on other people telling me anything. Instead, I investigated some of the science behind the Lazar story and have proven at least one claim to a scientific standard of proof, that is, his 7.46 Hz claim. Please watch our Bob Lazar playlist if this interests you. It may surprise you to know that outside the Lazar story, I am the world's biggest skeptic. I never believed the Lazar story until I investigated it for myself. The reason I was able to investigate the Lazar story is because he surrendered some technical information which can be scientifically tested. However, it seems to escape everyone's attention that nobody besides Bob Lazar ever seems to provide technical information. Apparently, whistleblowers, even with high-level security clearance, never seem to have access to any technical information. How is this possible? Don't you find this to be astonishingly convenient? Surely, if these people had high-level security clearance, it should lead to technical information. Why is this never the case? Why do we only hear fluffy stories built very clearly for journalists, but not for scientists or engineers? Why does this always happen? Once again, don't you find this to be astonishingly convenient? Could it be that these whistleblowers are planted by the military-industrial complex with instructions to amplify a fake threat so that it can extract more money from US taxpayers? Could it be that these whistleblowers are reinforcing a popular story so that the public is distracted from domestic and international policy failures? Why do these whistleblower stories make the media at precisely the time that they do? Why not 12 months earlier or 12 months later? Political timing is an important factor. It needs to be considered. To my way of thinking, the whistleblowers never go to prison and are never silenced because their claims are not real. Therefore, they are not a national security threat. If their whistleblowing were genuine, they'd be silenced immediately, either under penalty of prosecution or worse. Moreover, if their whistleblowing were genuine, the US government could not afford to publicly broadcast to the Russian and Chinese governments that they are in possession of space alien technology. An enemy having access to this technology may be sufficient reason for a nuclear first strike. What is particularly astonishing about all this is that the media never appears to be alarmed by the lack of technical information, no matter how high up the food chain their source apparently was. I simply cannot understand how it is possible for a so-called credible witness, or a person whom has worked closely with space alien technology, to never, ever provide technical information. That is, provide information which can be forensically decomposed. How is this possible? Surely even a cat would become suspicious of this. It defies belief that people on the inside cannot provide technical information of any kind. For example, no level of space alien technology could be so advanced that we cannot measure the weight of the spacecraft or the mass density of its materials of construction. Moreover, it does not seem to ring any alarm bells that the US government spends $800 billion per year on defence as of 2022. And they can't take a clear, high-resolution picture of a UFO? That's ridiculous. Surely you can understand this point. I recall seeing photographs taken from satellites 40 years ago of a man reading a newspaper and the headline was visible. That was 40 years ago. In the last 40 years, apparently our technology hasn't really improved very much. In fact, it has regressed, evidently. Once again, how is this possible? If we look at the Tic-Tac story, we see an extremely alarming impression being given to the public. It appears to me that the military-industrial complex is identifying yet another enemy which the US taxpayer will need to fund. Yet another enemy at the gate. If we review the Tic-Tac video, not even carefully, just review it, we can see that everything within the video can be easily faked and probably was. The picture is grainy, it's just a moving dot. Having spent decades in software quality assurance, I know that the information overlay could have been generated in an avionics software test environment, then pushed onto a screen where the end product is recorded. Software test environments are full of fake data. It's required for the software quality assurance process. All fighter aircraft have two-way data transfer from their base or ship. This means that the entire video feed can be pushed onto the aircraft avionics system, hence the pilot sees it. This means that everyone can be bamboozled, including the pilot. The pilot becomes a victim, like everyone else. Quite frankly, I am shocked and stunned that people are so gullible as to believe any of the Tic-Tac story. It looks so fake to me. It's like claiming that Santa Claus is a real person. It's like claiming that he really does come down a chimney every year, even if most of the world doesn't have chimneys. Santa Claus, as we know him nowadays, is American propaganda. He was dressed by Coca-Cola. This is historical fact. Look it up for yourselves. We have an expression in Australia, that is, only in America. That's what I'm seeing with the Tic-Tac video. It is such complete junk that only in America could they believe this. Only in America is the population so gullible that this Tic-Tac story gets taken so seriously. Americans seem to auto-reject any claim that the Russian or Chinese governments make, but they run to embrace the idea of Martians hiding on Earth, and only the US government has access to their technology and are actively covering it all up. I find this to be completely bizarre behaviour. So bizarre, I'm starting to wonder if it isn't chemically induced. Americans believe that they're so special, space aliens would never dare approach the Indian or Chinese governments, despite the fact that these two countries represent the highest density of human beings on Earth. Surely it makes sense that if space aliens were going to visit anywhere, they'd visit India or China first. America is just a suburb by comparison to India or China. Why would the Martians go to the suburbs when they can visit the central business district? No, America, you are not the most important society on Earth. I could digest the American sense of privilege a bit more if the Lazar story was the only one, but it's not. It's one of many, with many different types of spacecraft, seemingly involving the US with great frequency. This again should ring alarm bells. If we assign one space alien species per spacecraft design, then apparently we're being visited by very many different species of space aliens. This is also a cause for alarm, as it would be almost statistically impossible for dozens, if not hundreds, of different space alien species to be visiting us. Don't forget to visit us. They would all need to have access to amazingly advanced technology, all at the same time. It seems as though Americans believe that the movie Men in Black, starring Will Smith, is real. No, America, Men in Black is not a documentary. Bob Lazar did say that he witnessed multiple vehicle designs, but he also said that he only ever worked on one vehicle, and most significantly, he only provided technical information on one design. Therefore, we have no reason to believe that the other vehicles were of space alien origin. They could have all been man-made experimental designs, aside from the one that Lazar worked on. The reality is that we do not have any information whatsoever to go by, so the multiple designs Lazar refers to are irrelevant and can be dismissed. Regarding visual confirmation of Tic-Tac UFOs from so-called credible sources, doesn't it seem significantly more plausible that there could be holographic projection technology at play here rather than space alien Martians from the 12th dimension? Doesn't it seem significantly more plausible that man-made holographic technology may be responsible? It's existing technology and has been around for decades. Thus, if an advanced form of holographic technology were utilised, capable of fooling pilots, it is obviously an important military secret. If this explanation is correct, then uploading fake sensor information to military aircraft becomes a critical action because sensors and radar cannot detect holographic projections. Doesn't that make more sense rather than the Tic-Tac belonging to the Romulans, the Borg, or species 8472? Seriously, how gullible do you have to be to ignore the more plausible explanation? Okay, let's now walk through the Tic-Tac footage. Please note that I have set the video on a continuous backwards and forwards loop. To begin our analysis of the Tic-Tac video, we need to define a role for ourselves. We could choose to be a journalist, a member of the public, or anything we like. If we choose the role of a journalist, no analysis is required. We can stop right here and start selling the wow factor. However, for the purpose of this analysis, we're going to act as software quality assurance engineers. 4 main software testing phases exist. These are unit testing, systems integration testing, and user acceptance testing. Unit testing is typically executed by developers on their personal workstations. System testing and systems integration testing is typically executed by quality assurance engineers. User acceptance testing is typically executed by the business unit paying the bills, that is, the client. Specific test phases and approaches vary from industry to industry and country to country, but the four main phases I've listed are a good generalisation. The reason we need multiple testing phases is because developers bias testing for success. Quality assurance engineers bias testing for failure. To test for failure, you need as many tests as possible in the time permitted and fitting within the budget. For the purposes of our analysis, we're going to assume that we're executing user acceptance tests. In other words, we're taking on the role of the US Department of Defense and we're validating the avionics solution delivered by the defense contractor. Okay, so the defence contractor has built and delivered an avionics solution for the US Department of Defence to be deployed into the latest generation fighter. In order to deliver this solution, a contract was required. This contract necessitated the articulation of performance specifications which had to be delivered. For example, the number of targets which can be tracked simultaneously. The US Department of Defence could not request a generalised specification like all targets because all could mean an infinite number of targets. Infinity is not a practical engineering design standard, so the defence contractor would insist upon a specific number being written down. The same is true for the velocity of a target. An upper limit must have been specified in writing. Let's imagine that it was Mach 25, just to make sure that capacity exists to deal with the ever-growing threat of hypersonic missiles. Okay, so now we have the beginning of a test case that the end user will need to execute in order to accept the solution so that the defence contractor can get paid. If we know a little bit about how the solution works, we can write test cases to verify that the defence contractor has delivered what they've promised. For example, if an operational principle is visual contrast, then it's obvious that tracking a dot moving at Mach 25 across a background simulating the ocean would be a required test, because Mach 25 denotes a specification limit. As test engineers, one of the first places we'll test will be the performance limits. Tracking an object across a clear blue sky would be too easy, so I'd increase the difficulty by writing a test requiring an ocean background. As a test engineer, I want to make tests as difficult as possible within reason. Of course, the defence contractor wants all the test cases to be easy so that they can get paid quickly, but my role as the gatekeeper for the client means that I want to ensure that the client gets the best possible solution at no extra cost. Anyway, with respect to all of what I've just talked about, we need a test environment. We need to validate the solution delivered by the defence contractor against our requirements traceability matrix. The requirements traceability matrix maps all the requirements of the project to actual tests which validate the solution. It is absolutely normal industry software development lifecycle practice to take screenshots and screen recordings of tests, whether they pass or fail. If a test fails, the screen recording assists the developer in finding the defect and hence developing a fix. If a test passes, a screen recording acts as contractual evidence in favour of the defence contractor. So, what all this means is that the Tic-Tac video is entirely consistent with the software quality assurance process, and I claim that the video you're witnessing right now is probably a collection of screen recordings from the US Department of Defense user acceptance testing phase. You are not witnessing space aliens. If this is user acceptance testing phase evidence, the US Department of Defense will never confess to it publicly because they'll be telling the Russians and the Chinese the technology limits of key avionics functionality. So once again, the Tic-Tac video is terrestrial, not extraterrestrial. You should have noticed within the video, in a couple of places, what looked to me like a blurred image of a globular cluster. It looks like someone has taken an astronomical image and used it as Tic-Tac evidence when the camera zoomed in on the image. How is it that what started by appearing as a Tic-Tac ends up looking like a blurry astronomical image when zooming occurs? Surely this must be a cause for alarm. Once again, to my eyes, this entire video reeks of falsehood. Let's now summarise what we've covered. In this video presentation, we've covered three key facts. Firstly, America does not enjoy special privilege in the universe. Americans are not so special that the Martians only want to be talking with you and nobody else. Americans need to be suspicious of the fact that only America seems to have access to space alien technology. This really doesn't pass the smell test if you pause and think about it.
Secondly, the Tic-Tac video was fake and was probably produced in a software quality assurance test environment and pushed into aircraft cockpits from a base or ship, thus fooling everyone, including the pilots. Under no circumstances can anything software be trusted. It is simply too corruptible. It can be made to show anything you like, very, very easily and cheaply. Thirdly, the only valid space alien story comes from Bob Lazar. Therefore, all other stories are exercises in disinformation. I accept the Lazar story as truth because I've personally scientifically validated some of Lazar's key claims. Please refer to our Bob Lazar playlist. Well, that's enough from me. Cheers.